Welcome to the Leaders of Transformation podcast, the #1 show for entrepreneurs and business leaders passionate about uplifting others and making a greater impact in the world. Join Nicole Jansen each week as she interviews influential difference makers and world changers who share their inspiring stories, transformative insights, and practical tips to help you grow your impact and be the leader of transformation that you were born to be. Afterwards, make sure you head over to leadersoftransformation.com for full recaps of every show, along with valuable resources and opportunities so you can get connected and make things happen. Now, here's your host, transformational leader, speaker, and business advisor, Nicole Jansen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. On this show, I love interviewing people that are transforming the world in some way. I also love sharing people's stories that have done extraordinary things, kind of like the ordinary person that's doing extraordinary things. And that is truly the case here with Nigel Bennett. I read his book and it's called Take That Leap. For those of you watching, this is what it looks like. And I was captivated. I have to tell you, I was so captivated by this book, and I highly encourage, we're going to have a link where you can get a copy of it. But the stories he tells of growing up and working with his father at his company and then all the other adventures along the way, amazing, inspiring. And we just were having a conversation about was his normal. So he didn't really think of it as anything unusual. But he is an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and philanthropist. He is the founder of AquaGuard Spill Response, Inc., which is a global leader in oil spill control that works to protect water, which is the world's most precious resource. And we're just really excited to have him here and sharing a little bit of his insights. And some of that, again, you'll get in the book, but we're going to unpack it further. Nigel, welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thanks, Nicole. I really appreciate it. This is great. I'm really excited to be on your show. Yeah.
Well, and I'm really excited. And a shout out to Karen Schwab from Interview Valet.
Yes,
Her
absolutely.
and Tom have a great company. And
They're fabulous.
I had the chance to meet them actually, which I don't often do because so many people are spread out and everything. Mm-hmm. But when I was driving through Michigan on the way back to California, I had a chance to have lunch with them. And that was such a pleasure. And Karen connected me to you. And so I'm just so appreciative of that. So let's talk about your start in this. Like, why did you start this company? Where did this whole adventure begin for you?
Wow. It goes way back, as all of our stories do. Yeah. As a young guy, I graduated from high school. And the next day I was on a flight to Venezuela. And my father had a environmental mapping company where he was mapping the coastlines of various different countries, 9 different countries over 10 years for environmental sensitivities. And so I found myself hanging out of helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft and photographing coastlines and whatnot. And it just blew me away when I was doing an overflight over Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela. And we were doing a counterclockwise survey. And at the very bottom of the lake, I witnessed indigenous tribes living like they had for millennia on little sticks on huts on the lake, right, and fishing. It was quite beautiful. And as we hovered over and we flew up the west side of the lake, I just saw more and more and more oil contamination from the oil industry. And we got a little bit too close to the Colombian border, and we were there were some pot shots that were taken at us by the FARC guerrillas that were operating there at the time. That was back in the early 80s. And they're still operating there today. And so that was a big eye-opener for a kid I was probably 18 at the time. And over the next 10 years, I found myself working in about 9 different countries, from Egypt to Brazil to Venezuela, Malaysia, China, many, many different places. But then I was doing another helicopter survey over the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, the Red Sea. And I showed up at a helicopter base with an Egyptian fellow, and I showed up at the helicopter base, and this big American fellow waddled out. His name, I never forget, his name was Johnny. And he had a bit of a southern drawl, and he was instructed to take us on a flight over the Sinai so we could take photographs. And he said to me, I know why you're here, and I know what I got to do, and I know what I'm allowed to do, and I know what I'm not allowed to do. But hop in the chopper and I'll give you a flight. So he put me in the co-pilot seat and I put the helmet on. I was probably 22, 23 at the time. And as we lifted off, he was able to speak to me through the headset. And he said, okay, now I can talk. He said, before I couldn't talk, but now it's just us that have headsets. The guys in the back don't. He said, there's two guys in the back that are oil executives. And what I want you to do is you keep your camera between your legs. And when I tell you, start taking photographs through the glass in the floor, because there was a glass floor in the helicopter. And he said, but whatever you do, don't let those guys in the back see what you're doing, because we could both be arrested as spies. and I was shocked as a young kid. I was flying over, taking these photographs of some of these things he was going to show me. So we took off and we headed over to the Sinai. We headed up the west side, and we actually dropped these two fellows off. And then we lifted off again and we headed up, and all I saw was pipeline after pipeline after pipeline that was ruptured, and oil was flowing into the Red Sea. It was flowing like lakes into the Red Sea. He said, Nigel, take as many photographs as you can, get back and show as many people as you can with what's going on here. He said, I understand that people in Cairo and Alexandria, they can't feed themselves and they don't really care what's going on here because they're trying to survive. The only people that know what's going on is the people in the ivory towers in Houston and whatnot around the world. And you need to get this out. And then when we landed, he said to me, I know what you're doing. And I know that you really want to make a difference. You're a young kid and you really want to make a difference in the world. And I thought, well, yeah, I really do. I'm young. I'm full of vim and vigor, and I want to change the world. And he said, but you know what? I really don't think you can. And that was it. I never saw him ever again, but that resonated me for the rest of my life. So with a couple of I was in Egypt for probably 5 years on and off, or a 5-year period. And I was in all these other countries. And unfortunately, my father ran into a bit of trouble in Egypt. He was imprisoned and I had to escape out of the country. And it's a long story. It's in my book. But when I got back to Vancouver, Canada, where our head office was, I realized that I really did want to make a difference. And I didn't ever want to be in that type of situation again that my father was in, because our ethics clashed. I'll just put it at that. Our ethics clashed. And so I actually took my sister and another fellow. We went to British Columbia Institute of Technology together. And we left and we formed AquaGuard Spill Response, because I had clients that I had met all over the world that needed help. They needed help containing and recovering this oil that was seeping everywhere. So I formed AquaGuard Spill Response with my sister and this other guy. That was in 1992. And my dad wasn't that happy about it, but that's just kind of the way it was. Yeah. So that's a bit of a short or long story of how it all kind of started.
Well, you talk about oil spills.
Yeah.
I'm Canadian. I live down in the US, but I'm Canadian.
Right.
And the spill that happened, Exxon Valdez and all
Alaska in 89. Yep.
Yeah. All of that really made me aware. I had no idea that this was going on.
I know.
Like many, we just don't know.
We don't know.
And then when I was reading your book and you were talking about it's just mass amounts of oil that's spilling in. I mean, I know that with BP oil and what happened down
the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, we were involved in that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh, but not realizing until I read your book how much of that is actually ongoing, happening, and nobody's doing anything about it.
It's constant and it's chronic. I mean, you hear about these massive oil spills at BP Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico, Exxon Valdez, etc. But there's these chronic spills that go on behind closed doors, behind mangrove fields, massive mangrove fields in Mexico. But behind it, there'll be refineries and the oil's just oozing and seeping out. It's this ongoing. I've been in this business for almost 30 years now, I guess, including the time I was with my dad. And it's still happening to this day. So it's quite shocking. And I really wanted, as a young guy, I really wanted to make a difference. And I think I have made a difference with the company, hopefully. Our company's motto now is to protect the world's most precious resource, which is water. And I really believe that the wars of the future are going to be over water, not oil anymore. Fresh water.
Right. Yeah. So you provide technology, you provide equipment.
Yes.
And for spills, like you mentioned about BP oil or different ones, you go in and you help them with this technology. So give us a little bit of a sense of how you clean that kind of mess up.
Yeah, well, for example, the BP Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, it was probably the most idyllic condition for a massive spill. It's a terrible thing to say, but it was calm conditions in the Gulf. The weather conditions were favorable, although for a few days, but there was just not the Americans, Canadians, and everybody, we were just not prepared for anything that massive. So there is equipment there. There is equipment out there. We were shipping a ton of equipment every day from here, but it just wasn't enough. So what they decided to do was bomb the spill with the dispersant chemical, which basically disperses it into the water column, which is, you're not allowed to do this on any North American coastline unless it's a catastrophic spill, which that was. And they got the green light to bomb it, and that's what they did. But once you spray a spill with a dispersant, it takes the oleophilic capabilities out of machines to be able to recover it. So once you make that choice, you're not picking it up with traditional oil skimming systems.
Got it. So then you had to build the technology to be able to skim it from there.
Well, that's right. But now it's in the water column. You can't get at it. So now you've got it. You had it on the surface. Now you've removed it from the surface through the water column. And now it was on the surface where you could recover it if you had enough equipment. But now it's at depths from 1 foot to 5,000 feet.
Right. So it's in there.
Column.
So basically it's there.
It's in there.
People think that it's
out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Not true.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, this is expensive equipment.
Yeah.
And so with contracts like that, you can't get the contract unless you have the equipment.
That's right.
But then you need the money first before you can build the equipment. So how did you build to scale this business?
Yeah. In the early 90s, when we broke off, we had no money. We were in debt to my father. And we basically leveraged everything we had. My wife and I had a little house, and we just leveraged everything. We designed equipment. We'd get contracts, and we would borrow money from the bank, and we would build, and we would slowly ramp up. It was quite a struggle. Yeah, we had 3 little kids, and we were balancing everything. And we had a rusted out old Nissan car, and my kids were in the back seat in their baby seats, and they could see the road through the floorboards because it was all rusted. So we were riding a very thin line for quite a few years, my wife and I. We were able to get support, and we were able to build it up. And we've done business in about 104, 105 countries. We have about 3,000 customers around the world. Yeah. But the really cool thing is in the past 10 years, I've been able to set up the business to run without me. Yeah. It's been a delight. And with the help of a coach, I had a coach probably for 10, 15 years where I call it the kind of the doorknob effect. When you get to the office and you touch the door, and you take a deep breath and you step into your office because you have no idea what's going to be happening. And every day for me was chaos. So I had this coach, and he helped me set things up, over the years to be able to run without me. So I was able to promote people within the company. And I ended up buying out my partner of almost 30 years. And then a young fellow is running everything for me now. But now what it allows me to do is to do things that I feel are really important in the world. So I almost sold the business. I was so close. I had pretty much sold it to a large British competitor. And I go every year to this entrepreneurs conclave at MIT in Boston. And there was a speaker that came in, and her name was Lynn Twist. She wrote a book called The Soul of Money, really good book, Soul of Money. And an incredible woman making massive change in the world. And she invited myself and my family to go deep into the Amazon to experience a tribe that she had been working with to help preserve their way of life and to help keep the oil industry out. So that really resonated with me. I thought, the oil industry in Ecuador, I need to go. But I was in the middle of selling my business. The business was almost done, like the due diligence, a deposit had been paid, everything. And I went deep into the Amazon with Lynn and my family, and we did what's called an ayahuasca ceremony. So it was a ceremony. We had 2 shamans, which I didn't even know what a shaman was at the time. I didn't know what ayahuasca was. Ayahuasca is 2 vines that comes together and makes a serum, and it's a bit of a hallucinogenic. And they actually use it these days to treat drug addiction and things like that. So I took some of this ayahuasca, and I went off on this journey, and I sat in front of a shaman, and he was chanting and whirling a feather around. And I saw a very happy, beautiful, amazing face. And then the face changed to this face of great responsibility, staring right through into my soul. I thought it was going right into my soul. And it really scared me. And then I went back to this beautiful face, and I went back to this banana leaf and lay down, and off I went on this journey. And what I really think was happening there is my conscience was coming awake. And my conscience was basically trying to tell me, Nigel, don't sell your business. Leverage your business, keep your business, and use your business to do good in the world, whatever good is, but leverage it. And, I kind of shook my head and no, the deal's done. I'm going to get this big bag of cash. It's every entrepreneur's dream. You can go sell t-shirts on the beach or do whatever you want to do from now on. But it really bothered me. And I flew back to Vancouver, and on the flight, I'm like, no, not selling the business. So then I got another flight. I flew to London. I took the deal off the table, came back and bought out my partner and set up the business basically to run without me. And now that's what I do is I leverage everything and everybody that I know because I have a platform. I have this platform of 30 years of working around the world. And I know so many amazing people doing incredible things. I couldn't sell that. I was just not going to give that up. And now I leverage everything to do really cool stuff. And I've met so many amazing people because of it. And I think as an entrepreneur, we have a responsibility not to just hoard as much cash as we can, but to actually do something with it and be we should be socially responsible. Yeah. So that's where, yeah.
Absolutely. I remember as I was growing up, my parents were always, focused. Obviously, they wanted to make money that provide for the family and so forth, but they were always very mission driven. And so to me, I actually grew up with this concept that that's what business was about.
Wow.
And so Fantastic. It was like, well, you built a business so you could create value. That was your way of fulfilling your mission in life.
Wow.
And then through that, you're going to make money, but it's not the first and foremost thing.
Right.
And so then in the last several years, this topic of purpose-driven businesses, mission-driven businesses has been much more prevalent. And I remember when people first started talking about it, I'm thinking, well, isn't that what business is about? Isn't that what it's for?
Yeah.
And so kind of like what we were talking about previously about this norm.
What's your norm? Yeah.
What's your normal? And I do believe that business is designed for that. Entrepreneurs, that's our responsibility, is to use that creativity and do something good rather than just making
it's really interesting that you said that, because in your world, the way you evolved, that was your perceived normal, just like we said. That mine wasn't. I was raised in more of a right wing, take as much as you can, build and then have all these shiny things. That's the way I was raised that way. Although I was really, really connected to nature, I would kind of shrug things off and I would take off. I climb mountains and I go rock climbing and I do all this to get away. But your perceived norm, which is amazing. That's how you probably feel that that's how everybody was raised, but that's not necessarily true. And for me, my perceived normal, I assume that's how everybody else was raised like me. That's not true either.
Right. Well, and it's really then what we're talking about is challenging that status quo, right?
Yes.
What is it that we really do believe, and is that working for us? What is the byproduct of that, and is that getting us what we really want? Now, your book is called, I want to shift gears. Your book is called Take That Leap. What is the biggest leap that you've taken?
Oh my gosh, there's so many leaps, but I really think that the biggest shakeup and the biggest leap that I took was when I met Lynn Twist, and she invited us to go into the Amazon, and I shifted gears from taking the bag of cash to actually keeping the business and leveraging the business. I think that was I had a major awakening. I had a major shift.
So how did things change when you came back?
Everything changed. We'd met so many incredible people. Most of them were women. Most of them on the journey that we went on were women, and very successful businesswomen. And actually, in fact, my wife next week is going to New York with the same group, with Lynn Twist. They're working with the Women's Nobel Laureates. And there's that Nobel Laureate Women's Lunch in New York. So my wife's taking part in that. And it's just working in the business world is one thing, but working in this world when you're kind of awake, it's a totally different thing. I believe that people are attracted to people like that. And I'm meeting so many incredible people that are doing amazing things around the world because I took the step out of that world into this world and just let it happen organically. And I've met so many incredible people. My kids and I was able to set the business up to run without me. I took a year off and traveled with my family around the world. We went to 17 countries and we were working in orphanages and we did some things like that. We did a lot of underwater scuba diving. But what really ticked me off was the amount of pollution and plastic in the oceans. So my kids and we created an app and a movement called True Beach, TRUBEACH, and which allows people to go to beaches to post what they see and share what's really going on out there. And it brings awareness back into the communities, not to throw their garbage over the fence into the dry creek, because when it rains, it ends up in the ocean. And so it's allowed me to do all these type of things like that. And we've also started another movement called giftadd.com, because I'm dyslexic and I have ADD and so does my son. And just to prove that people with ADD and dyslexia, we're not dummies. There's a lot of amazing people with ADD. It's not a curse, but it's actually a gift.
Yes. Well, lots of entrepreneurs are ADD actually. So
I know. And my coach and I, actually Kevin Lawrence, this coach, we formed giftadd.com with my son because he works with CEOs all over the world. And he said that's the number one common thread.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about your family and involving your family in this. And I know that started out, you went down there with Lynn Twist. Yes. And then now you were in Mexico and you started to do. So tell us about that story of taking your family. That's a risk. Talk about taking a leap. That's a risk, is taking your kids with you into uncharted territory for you.
Probably like 15, 20 years ago, I really wanted to help. I really wanted to give back, but I had no idea what to do. And I run into people all the time. I really want to help, but I don't know what to do. And I was at a entrepreneurs organization meeting in California, in Santa Monica, and went for lunch with a friend of mine. And he was doing amazing things, incredible things. In the Vancouver East Side here, he built women's shelters, and he was leading trips to Mexico and to help build homes for the homeless. And I asked my friend Dave, I said, Dave, how do you do this? You're such a busy guy. And he goes, Nigel, it's not that difficult. He says, just take the first little step. Stop on the side of the road, have a chat with a homeless person. They're human. People feel that they're invisible, so have a chat. Buy them a sandwich. Give them $5. Don't question what they're going to do with it. Give them $5. And after that, things will start to unravel or start to make sense. And then he invited me to go to Mexico with him and his family to help build homes for the homeless. And the first year, I'm like, no, we didn't go. Second year, after seeing his photographs and sharing his stories with us, I went. But the most incredible thing is we went, and my daughter's 20 now. She was 3 years old the first time she went. And her two brothers were a little bit older. And the deal was the kids could take an extra day off school if they gave a presentation to their class when they got back. So when they got back, my daughter was probably in like a preschool thing. One of the years later, she was in a preschool. And so I helped her put on a presentation. And then my other son was in grade 2 or something. And then my older son did his own presentation. We got home that night. The phone started ringing off the hook at our house. And it was the parents of the kids that were in the class, because the kids in the class saw a peer building and painting and building this home for homeless. And so they wanted to come. And they said, well, great, but we just go. And they said, well, could you organize a trip? We started organizing these trips, and now we're 17, 18 years later. We've gone 18, 19 times, maybe, probably taken 700 people. And it's been the most incredible thing. It's only a 4-day trip. My son actually was there last week. My 25-year-old son was there last week again building. And I just feel that to sign a check is great. To give of yourself is incredible. But to give as a family, I don't think there's anything more powerful than giving as a family. And it gives me more joy in my whole life to be able to be giving and helping as a family.
Yeah.
And especially when they're young, because they have time. When they're older in their 20s, they're so busy. It's harder to get them. But when they're young, and like your parents did with you, you were raised like that. And that's ingrained in you forever. And you pass it down to the next generations, et cetera. And I think it's invaluable for us. And I think I'm not saying it's a responsibility as parents, but it brings me more joy than anything.
Yeah, I think of this statement. There's a statement within certain circles of believers that say, Christians, that will
Mhm.
say families that pray together, stay together.
Right. Yeah.
I think also when you think of your example,
Mhm.
families that give together, stay
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well, because you
Yeah.
bond, you bond. It's like,
You
when you
do.
go and you
Oh
have
my
those
gosh.
experiences.
Yeah.
I've had experiences with people in business, different types of, let's say, intensive trainings or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
we may not talk for years,
Yes.
but we could pick up the phone and it's like, I know that you know that there's a bond there
There is. There
because we
is.
experienced something together.
Yeah, exactly. And the most incredible thing is a lot of the kids, they would be repeats. They would come and we would take kids on their own without their families, or we'd take their families. And so this is when they were younger. Now, my son's friends, they're all in their mid-20s. They're all 25, 26. Well, they call me every year. Nige. Hey, we're going to go home. So when are we going? We're going to put our... I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, that's amazing. I just can't I get tears in my eyes. Just so it's the most incredible thing. It's kind of that next generation
That's your
taking it.
legacy right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's
Part of your legacy. I mean, your legacy is, there's many different aspects of that. We talk about the oil spill response business that creates a legacy. There's so many different legacies. But so when you think of this
yeah,
whole, like everything that you do, you've alluded to it. You have a coach, you have support around you.
yes,
I know from your reading your book, at one point you were trying to do it all yourself.
yes.
Talk about the importance of asking for help, because I think sometimes we
Oh
have a
my
really
gosh.
hard time
Yeah,
to do
we
that.
do. I know. And unfortunately, I watched my father. He never asked for help. He didn't trust anybody for one thing, and it was all on his own. Where I tried, but I was really lucky. I had a good business partner when I broke off, and my sister was really close. My sister stayed in the business only about 4 years, but we were really tight. But then, yeah, we had a coach come in, and I was against the coach, and that was one of the best things I ever did. And then this coach recommended me to another coach because I was talking more personal stuff than business stuff. And he said, "No, I can't help you. You need to talk to this guy." And so I hired this Kevin Lawrence fellow, and together we were able to work through so many things. I just couldn't do it alone. Another thing was when I was in the bee's nest, when I was the whole doorknob effect bee's nest thing in early 90s, another friend of mine, he was a professional football player. He was a lineman. He was 330 pounds, and he was in the professional leagues in Canada. And he just retired. He's got into business, and he joined this group called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, which now is the Entrepreneurs Organization. And he literally grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, and he said, "Nigel, you're coming with me to a meeting." And I'm like, "No, I haven't got time. I've got 3 young kids. I've got a business when I'm just scratching to survive." And he goes, "That's exactly why you have to come." And he grabbed me and he took me to a meeting. I ended up joining a focus group or forum group inside that. And I was a member for like 18 years. And then I've been in another group since. But peer groups, oh my gosh. I can't say how valuable peer groups are. And the Entrepreneurs Organization for me has just been one of the best things I ever did. And then the coaching. And I mean, without that, I honestly don't know where I'd be. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'd probably be divorced and my kids would hate me and I would have lost my business. I really believe that. I really
You
believe
would have
that.
been burned out possibly. And
I'd have been burned out. Yeah. And now, like you said, our family, our kids, I mean, we do everything together. I mean, my daughter's in Japan. She's 20. She's teaching skiing for this season. And we have a family Snapchat, and she Snapchats like 8 times a day. It drives us crazy. We're all on this, all 5 of us are on this now. And then we've adopted kind of a son from the Homes of Hope in Mexico. He's 35 and he's back there. So he's part of our family Snap. We have this, it's just, but it wouldn't be unless I had the Entrepreneurs Organization and my coach and whatnot. Scary to think. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you tell entrepreneurs who get to that point of being burned out, that kind of lost that loving feeling?
Yeah. Which happens. It happens.
Happens a lot.
Happens a lot. And we're on this roller coaster. Well, I belonged to this group at MIT. It was part of the Entrepreneurs Organization for many years. And we've kept it going this is my 16th year coming up in April. And I have members come up to me and they say, "Nigel, tell me about this coach that you got." And I tell them about it and I tell them all the great stuff. And they go, "Oh, well, how much is it?" And I tell them, and it's not cheap. And they go, "Oh, yeah, okay, maybe I'll get." And I check in with these guys year after year after year, still having, and it's still, their lives are still a disaster. you have to find the right coach, the right personality fit
Yeah.
for you. And you need somebody to really hold your feet to the fire.
Most people think
Yeah.
about it as a cost, though. It's interesting because
I
being a
know.
coach myself, people say,
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
do you charge? Wow.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you're not paying for my hour or
Yeah.
however much time that we're going to spend
Right.
together. What you're paying for is the impact that you're going to get
Yeah.
out of it and the growth, like what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
so they look at it as a cost versus an investment. They're not looking at
Yeah.
the potential ROI of it. They're looking
Yeah.
at, well, can I afford to spend whatever the amount is?
I
And
know.
it's definitely in the thousands, tens of thousands,
Oh, yeah.
depending on how long
Yeah.
you're working with them.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you go, yeah, but what's it worth to you?
Yeah. I mean, if I look back, if you want to talk about ROI, it's got to be 10 times. Easily.
Yeah.
Or more.
Hard to
But
calculate
when
when you talk about
you're in-
family and
Yeah. I mean, even just business, even my business profitability and whatnot, and just that tiny piece.
Yeah.
It's well worth it. Forget all the personal stuff, but the personal side of it. Wow.
So talk
Absolutely
also about,
invaluable.
I know you love the outdoors and you go do these crazy extreme sports adventures, which I'm like, yeah, I love extreme sports, but I'd rather go in a car really fast than to be
Right.
skiing
Sure.
down some hill or
Right.
climbing some cliff with
Yeah.
freestyle. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you. But everybody has their thing, right? So
Yeah.
talk about
Mm.
that outlet and the importance of having that outlet.
Yeah. It was funny. My little sister, 90-pound sister, she was the one that got into the outdoors a little bit earlier than I did. She had a boyfriend that was a mountain guide. So they used to drag me around and they used to call me the expendable brother because they'd throw me on a rope and send me off to check things out. But then I became addicted to it. And my sister and I, when we first started AquaGuard, way back in 1992, we would yo-yo off. I would go off. My wife and I'd head off to Nepal for 3 weeks and do some trekking and stuff. And she would hold down the fort, and then I would come back, and then she would be on. She did big mountain stuff, so she'd be on a 3-week expedition to Mount Logan here. So she'd be off doing that, and we got into this rhythm, into this flow of getting away. And I found that when I got away, I could think clear. I could think clearly. And then when I would come back, I would have all these solutions to these issues that I was stuck at work. And it was like, again, the bee's nest. And I couldn't think, couldn't see the forest through the trees. And then I went away and I'd go on a rock climbing trip or a backcountry ski trip or go climb some mountain or whatever it was, and just completely disconnect and then hyper focus on what I was doing, because you have to. And then I would come back and be an aha moment. That's how you do it. And it's usually a very simple answer, but you couldn't see it because you're so busy with life. So my sister and I, we always got into this rhythm of going away, and I still do it. I just got back. I was 5-day backcountry ski trip with my son last week, and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, you're climbing for 5-6 hours a day, and you're ripping off your climbing skis, and you're dropping off the top of a mountain and peeing the backside. But I come back totally cleansed and ready for the next adventure.
Yeah, and I think that I noticed for myself that I also inherited from my parents a very strong work ethic of go, nonstop.
Yeah.
And this kind of like delayed gratification that later, we'll do that later. And what I noticed, there comes a point for me that if I don't go do that thing, whatever that thing is, or get outside of my box and my little world, then my mind wanders there anyway. And so I'm ineffective. I'm like, no, we got to stay focused here. And yet I'm ineffective. And so I might as well just go take the trip because I'll come back far more productive than if I would have just stayed and done it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And it also, I think about, and recently I was just thinking about this. I'm like, I need to go somewhere because I'm feeling like you start to shrink into your little box.
You do.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the word actually that came up for me this morning as I woke up, the word expand came up for me. It's like, and I text myself things sometimes so I don't have to get up and go to my computer or whatever, or journal or grab anything. Sometimes I'll just, if my phone's nearby, because it's got my alarm on it, or it's like the first thing that came to mind was expand. You need to expand yourself. It's like, okay, how can I do that? And again, when we talk about taking a leap, what's that leap to take? Sometimes it's just to leap out of that little box that we're in, this however many mile radius or kilometer radius that we're in, to be able to see and have a perspective, not to run. There's a big difference, not to run away from things, but to step away from things. So
and like my friend said, I really wanted to give back. I really wanted to help, but I was thinking of this big thing. But he said, no, it's this little thing. It's take that first little step. It's the same as this. Take that first little thing. I mean, for me, my wife knows me so well. She's like, you need to go for a bike ride. So I go mountain biking. I climb out in the mountains and I go on my own. But I go for an hour and a half loop outside of my house and I climb the mountain. And she knows when I go and I come back, I can go to Bed Bath and Beyond. I can do anything with her after that because I'm happy and I'm content because I've had my little release in the woods, in the wilderness, and I'm good. And it just resets me.
Yeah,
and
you don't have to wait to go to Nepal to do it.
I don't have to go to Nepal. I don't have to go on a backcountry ski trip. I can just go out. I can go for a jog wherever. And I really think that we, as an entrepreneurs and people, we hear this thing about you got to have life balance. You got to balance this to keep that. I really don't think it's a life balance. I think it's a life rhythm. You got to just keep in this flow. And once you're in the flow, everything opens up. That's what I found when I was able to step out from the business world into this other world of really helping and giving back and really leveraging my platform and everything. As I get into this flow and I jump out of bed and I've got this book, which is so much fun. I've never been in this space before. I've never written a book before. And I think it's just wonderful. And talking to all these amazing people, I just get into this groove and this flow and you're flowing. You're not balancing one. You're not giving something up for the other. I'm in everything and I'm just kind of flowing along and it's incredible.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I have a friend of mine. We did a whole thing on this at one point, talking about there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Yeah.
And it's that when you talk about flow, it's that harmony. It's that because balancing is kind of like I'm juggling. And at some point you drop something.
Yeah.
And so it's that flow. I love that. Yeah. That is so good.
Yeah.
Well, Nigel, thank you for spending some time with us here today and inspiring us. Great. Really, really great. And love to hear more stories and continue this dialogue with you and stay in touch and that.
Absolutely.
And I encourage our listeners to go get a copy of Nigel's book, Take That Leap. It's on Amazon. We'll make sure the link is in the show notes.
That's one other little thing there. So all the 100% of the proceeds of my book and all the speaking and everything that I do, all go to various causes and charities that our family supports. So,
which I love that. Thank you for reminding me. I wanted to actually point that out. Yes, I forgot about that. So so get a copy of the book. You'll be supporting a charity in the process, and you'll also be supporting yourself and giving yourself that added inspiration and encouragement that it's possible. That if Nigel can do it, you can do it. Yes, I personally think he's an extraordinary individual, but he's an ordinary person doing extraordinary things, like I said in the beginning, and that can be you as well. And I believe that leaders of transformation take action. So do something today. Take that leap, that little leap. If you're feeling like you're at the max, maybe it is that bike ride that you need just to get some fresh air. Mm-hmm. But also looking at it and saying, how can you use your business for good rather than working up to the exit and the sale is to, and in the book, actually, he talks more about that. And so I'd encourage if you are considering selling your business to read his book first to get some perspective on that. And so that you don't go too far that you sell it, then you wish you didn't because you now miss out.
I know a lot of people that have done that. Probably 80% of the people that I know that have done that, and I know a lot, all regret they didn't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. My dad, we looked back years later and we looked at certain businesses and it was never, oh, I'm so glad we got rid of that business, or that when we look back and go, yeah, that was a gold mine in so many ways.
Yeah.
Right. And the impact and so forth. And so oftentimes we think in either or rather than and. How can we use this for good? Yeah. My dad did not have mentors. And so if he wanted to do something else, he had to give up this to do this. If he needed to fund another initiative or another investment, he thought he needed to sell this one to get the money to build that one. And that's such a big mistake. He just didn't know until later, looking back and going, I didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you always have this eggs in one basket. It's just moving the basket around. So
yeah. I found,
lessons.
I mean, I could talk forever, but I found that the people that I know that have had these businesses, these great businesses and sold them, they're living in this world of abundance. Things are ticking along and it's going. As soon as they sell, they go from abundance to scarcity because they build a wall around this principle that they've got and they're not getting the returns that they got when they had their business and everything and the stress and the anxiety. And it's this transformational, and I've seen it many times.
Wow.
And it's terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm working on a project actually with a core group of people on generosity and exploring this concept of generosity. And a lot of times, this was my observation, which kind of inspired this, is that I realized that in the world, so many people talk about they want to have whatever their language is around it, but they want to have this abundant life, this great life. I want to be happy. I want to have financial freedom, whatever they call it, and fulfillment, all that. They want to have this abundant life.
Sure.
And yet, what I realize is that the problem, why do we not have that? More people have that. And as a society, why are there more people that are depressed and anxious and families are breaking apart and businesses are struggling and all this? It's like, if that's the goal, why is more and more of society actually going the other direction? And what I realized is that the reason that is happening is because we're trying to, as a society, trying to get to abundance through scarcity. And it never happens.
It never happens. I know.
And so, so there's a whole different shift that we get to have in order to create that. And that comes from that place of love and generosity and giving and contribution, however you want to put that, that creates that abundance. Another gentleman that I had on this show, James Lenhoff, he's a financial planner, certified financial planner. And he talks about his clients, and they might have millions of dollars.
Sure.
And yet they're afraid to give it away because their ceiling, the goal which they got to, then becomes their floor. And they're like, well, I wanted to get this much money. Now I have this much money, but then I can't give it away because then I won't have it.
That's right.
And so it's like now it becomes their floor and they're afraid and they're in scarcity and I got to hold on to it. Or if they're retired and then they're looking and saying, I've got to make sure I have enough money, until I die.
Yeah.
And they miss out on enjoying it. And sometimes they have so much money that it's like, you're not going to be able to spend this all. Like there's no way. There's might as well give away some of this money and do something with it while you're still alive. And so, really, really great. Well,
I know
Nigel,
my friend Lynn Twist always said money is like water. It flows out and it flows back in, but it just rushes back in.
That's why it's called currency.
That's why it's called currency. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's cash flow because it's supposed to flow. If it doesn't flow, it stagnates.
It stagnates. Yeah.
And it loses its value. Yeah.
There you go.
That's the whole monetary system. You want to know how the whole monetary system works? It's got to flow. It's true, though. It's true. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
So, Nigel, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. That's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been a blessing. So, NigelJBennett.com is the website to connect with Nigel. Again, his book is on the website. It's also on Amazon. You can get a copy of it. Take that link. We'll make sure the links are in the show notes as well as social links so that you can connect with Nigel. So go check out those show notes. Lots of great resources. We'll also make sure that all the key takeaways, which is kind of like almost like a transcript that we clean up, will be there as well. So if you want to review this in print, you'll be able to do that. And that's at theleadersoftransformation.com. And you can also, of course, find us on social media. We'd love to hear what you're up to in the world, how you're making an impact. And if you have questions or comments, we want to hear that too. And if you like this episode, please share it with another entrepreneur who maybe needs to hear this. Share it with a friend and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Man, those ratings and reviews make such an impact and determines how many people actually get to hear this podcast and even find out about it by the rating system that they have. So you can really help us out by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.
You have been listening to the Leaders of Transformation podcast. Thank you for being here. Remember to follow us on social and get connected. Apply to join our private Facebook group and share with us how you're making a positive impact. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and help us empower more leaders of transformation to step up and make this world a better place for everyone.